I think it's very easy for everyone to get involved and use creative forms of activism to try to bring more peace and unity and especially civility to so much of the conflict that we're seeing across the country. And I think it really begins with the dialogue that we have with one another. For us to step out of our comfort zones and to look around us. I mean, even just looking in the room right now, how diverse the room is, and to know that we can learn so much from one another if we just step outside of our comfort zone and ask someone who doesn't look like us to share their story and learn a little bit more about them. And, of course, I don't expect everyone as activists to show up on the front lines. Those are really scary places to be sometimes in the midst of the riots and the protests. But I think we can take a more proactive approach in being creative in trying to create change. And it really just starts with how we embrace one another. And that really helps push us closer towards equality. Um, People don't expect the middle-aged black man who should be so angry and upset about the injustices that we see. I don't think people expect me to respond with love. I don't think people expect me to turn the other cheek. But just knowing that that is the message that the peace activists and the leaders who came before me, that was the message that they taught. And so even though, sure, I get it, people should feel upset and they should try to walk with this male bravado and feel tough, but I don't think that that's always the solution. Sometimes the solution is to respond with love, and it can be difficult at times, when you see the inequalities and the injustices that are taking place. Sure, I get upset. I get upset all the time. And when I'm there on the front lines, there's often things that get me upset. But I know that being macho in that moment doesn't solve much. And I think just in the same way that I raise my children, with love because I want them to love one another. I want them to love their classmates and the people that they're around. And, I think that should, again, be viewed as a masculine trait because I think we're raised to feel like love is not a masculine trait or to share your feelings. That's not a masculine trait. I talk more than my wife in my house, and I love to share my feelings, and I'm constantly trying to get her to open up about her feelings. And I think that we dismantle that just by showing the example of being good communicators, being affectionate with our children and our family members and the people that we're around. But then when we're tested in places where people expect us to react in such an angry or violent way, when you can shock people and show them I'm going to react with class and I'm going to respond with love, then that's how we change that. I do think that there is a bit of truth to some of the stereotypes. It's just they're often presented in a very disrespectful way. They when they're presented to us, they're intended to put us down. And I think it's all in one, the presentation, but also in how we receive it. When we can treat things lightheartedly, like you said, yes, I absolutely love fried chicken, and I don't have a problem with that. And yes, I'm a track athlete, and I did really well at that, and I expect my sister on the other end to have also done well with that. So you can't use that as a put down for me. And I think that when we can take away people's ammunition that they would try to use against us and say, I'm going to try to use this as a put down. Oh, all the black guys can play basketball. So what if they can? But I think that we should also step outside of those stereotypes and shock people sometimes. When you're a black mathematician or you're a black scientist, oh wow, I didn't expect that. And we break down those stereotypes. And I think it's just really important for us to remove the ammunition that people are using against us. Because yes, there is a bit of truth to a lot of the stereotypes, but we can't take offense to all of those things. And I try my best not to, and I encourage other people not to as well. I use those as opportunities to educate and inspire people. Of course, I get upset. I remember just 2 years ago, I was coming across the Mexican border with a few friends of mine in the car, And as we got to the checkpoint and they asked for our IDs, the officer, he closed the booth. And we're sitting there waiting, not thinking anything about it. And my buddy who was in the passenger seat, he was like, yo, something's going on behind us because everybody is running out of their cars right now. I was like, shoot, we should too. And we turn around, you know, and we turn around, but the other cops are like using the cars that people are running out of, and they're positioning their weapons towards our car. And I'm like, I'm a peace activist and the hugs guy. Why are they drawing weapons on us? You know, and we didn't know what was going on. They had us step out of the vehicle, walk backwards with our hands up, literally walked up to the barrel of their gun, then they had us kneel down, put us in cuffs, took us into a back room, and literally shackled us from our arms to our feet to the bench. The whole time we're asking, why is this happening? This is Martin Luther King Day 2016. We just went down to go to the beach. We're asking why this is happening. No reason. They couldn't give us any reason why it was happening. They held us there for about 45 minutes after they let us go. And we still continued to ask why they did it. And they said, you should just be lucky that you get to go, you know? And so we left. And so you can imagine the rage that was in me as I went back home. And you're furious, you know, because you're like, why was I treated like this? I was treated literally like a terrorist, but I've never committed any crime ever in my life, and neither did my friends who were in the car. And, you know, they wanted to do so much about it. We should go over there and do this, that, and the other. I said, no, let's use it as an opportunity to educate and inspire. So what did we do? We went right back down to that border, turned on the cameras, filmed a video about our experience, and broadcast it out to the world that this is how people are getting treated, Black people, just for crossing the border, coming back into the United States. I went to Mexico just to hang out at the beach with some friends in Rosarito. Coming back, that was what we dealt with. And so if I would have just been quiet about it, or I would have done something ignorant in response, then they win, because now I'm in jail, right? If I go and react the way that they probably wanted me to react. But to make sure that other people are aware of these injustices that take place. And fortunately, you know, now I have a platform of 1 million people who follow me on social media. People watched that video. People wrote letters down there and said, what is going on at our borders? You know, and so that's so important, to be able to educate and inspire people. And I felt good afterwards, just knowing that when you use social media for what it's intended for, you have a lot of power. And I try to use that power to get that message out there, rather than just getting upset and flipping out and ending up in jail. So, well, I think that tolerance in America, you know, I actually try to not use that word as much. I usually push people more towards the word of inclusion. You know, I don't want people to tolerate me. I want people to include me. I want you to include me in your jobs. I want you to include me in your schools. I want you to include me in your activities, your lifestyle. Include me in America and make me feel like I'm supposed to be here. And I think that's so important. And the more that we can really push people towards that, you know, that message of like tolerance, yes, it's important, but you know, when you think of the root word of it, I just want to be included, you know, and so many people do. And you know, I think that the more that we can really start getting that message out to people, then we're moving towards where we want to be. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you all for having me here. I came out from California to receive this award, and it's such an honor to be tied to so many great people, such as Simeon Booker with the award, but also tonight just learning more about the work that Terry does. And it blew me away, you know, to know that when my mom moved to South Central Los Angeles as a single mother with 5 kids, we relied on people like himself that gave us information on how to get into shelters that would help us, and pointed us towards programs that really helped our family out, you know, because my mom, at that time, she relied on my dad for everything. And right after their divorce, she decided, you know, for the safety of my kids, I'm going to raise 5 kids on my own. And she did. And, she never would have guessed that her baby son, who was living in this homeless shelter, would grow up to be on the front lines of riots and protests and trying to de-escalate violence. And so much of that was, the work of people like Terry that kind of pointed us in the right direction, but also getting to South Central Los Angeles in the 90s and experiencing the 92 riots, the Rodney King riots that took place there at such a young age. And it really left such an impression on me, even as a boy, to know that I wanted to make a difference. And I always grew up with this mindset of not just sitting around and always asking, why doesn't someone do something about that? I see things and I say, I can do something about that. And it took a long time for me to get to that point. I spent so many of my young adult life years just very insecure and introverted. I didn't talk to too many people when I was in school, aside from my own siblings. Kids were not nice to me when I was in high school and middle school because many of them knew that I lived in a homeless shelter. And so you just weren't the cool kid because of that. And so to have found my voice as an adult after just seeing so many of these riots and injustices and protests and things taking place and seeing them turn violent and so negative, I knew that I can have a voice in talking to people and being able to de-escalate the violence. And even though my work, my brand says free hugs when I show up to these things, it's really about the communication that we have with people that can bring a little bit of calm to many of the situations that we're seeing there. And just being able to teach people empathy and inclusion and to really listen to one another, even when we're on opposing sides. I mean, that's the biggest problem right now is that everything in the media and so many things that we look at today, it's actually dividing us, especially social media. People are just taking sides against one another and no one is really listening to each other anymore. So now so much of my work is to bring people together. And it's just an honor to be acknowledged for that type of work of just trying to bring people together. And I think that we need so much of that right now. We're letting politics divide us. We're letting our social media feeds and everything else divide us. And we just need more people stepping up as peacemakers to really try to bring people together and create change in this world. So I thank you all for having me here, and especially for the award and acknowledging the work that we're doing out there on the front lines, and especially with what you're doing with homeless families. It means so much to me. I don't think I could be standing here today if it wasn't for people like yourself that would, point us in the right direction and come into the shelters. One of my favorite people as a kid that I don't often share this story, but when I was that kid living in the shelter, I remember around the time I was 13 years old, and I was constantly asking my mom, how come everybody else has everything and we have nothing? And she said, it gets better from here. And I remember there was a guy when I was living in LA, he would always come down to the shelter every week and he would read books to us. And because of that, even since 13 years old, and I'm an old man now, but since then, my favorite book or story is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe from the Chronicles of Narnia, because this guy would come down there and he would make us forget that we were homeless. And all we cared about was going into this land of Narnia. My whole life, I was trying to find this Turkish delight that they talk about in the story. Because I'm like, this guy was willing to sell his soul for some Turkish delight. Like, I didn't care about being homeless in those moments. I just cared about what people were able to provide for me to just make me think bigger. I can't remember a single dollar that people gave us back then, and I'm sure they did, but it's not the money that makes a difference. It's the impact that we have on people's lives. And for me, it was people who come in and they share stories and they inspire us and they tell us to dream big and think big. And it was because of that the people that I would meet along the way, a track coach that I met along the way that told me I can be great, and I believed that. And that got me to college. It got me from college to being able to run professionally for a couple of years, all because someone just believed in me, rather than seeing me walk through the halls as this shy and introverted kid with my head down all the time and my hands in my pocket, couldn't even make eye contact with people when I would speak to them. And now I'm going out onto the front lines and boldly stepping up in people's face. I never could have imagined that I would be that person. but I know I only became that person because of the people who popped up in my life and inspired me along the way. And so I just want to encourage everybody here to try and be that more for the people in the world. People are hurting out there today. People are depressed. They're frustrated with so many of the things that we're seeing all around us. And sometimes we just need someone to come up and say, it's going to be all right, or to give us some words of encouragement, or pat you on the back, or give you that hug to let you know it's going to be all right. You know, you'd be surprised how many people that I give a hug and they just cry on my shoulder, complete strangers. It happens in the airport all the time. It happens as I go and visit schools. And I let people know, look, I don't know your story, you know, but I just want to let you know it gets better and you matter. So then that's what people are really fighting for right now. We see all of these movements, these organizations, everyone is fighting to proclaim that they matter. So let's show them that. Thank you.